Pittsburgh Steeler fans, welcome in to this edition of the Steelers Weekend Q&A. My name is Jeremy Betts. So happy to be a part of the Steel Curtain Network from the Fans First Sports Network, bringing you podcasts and news, notes, and articles online every single day of the week. It's a blast. I hope that you can join me this morning on a Saturday morning and talk some Steelers football. Steelers coming off the bye week. Got a lot of things to prove coming out of a break where, yes, they have a winning record. Yes, they went into it with a lead in their division. However, not everything was roses. Not everything looked good in the process. So Steelers had a lot to work on and made it a point over this extended rest and bye to get some things figured out. How much of that they have done is the big question. Has the offense figured out how to produce at an NFL level and be a part of this team as opposed to and be a part of the reason they win as opposed to letting the defense take control of things and then kind of accidentally falling into, well, eventually we've got to score sometime and maybe that's good enough to win. That can't be the formula moving forward if this team wants to find success this year. Obviously, fans are skeptical from everything from Mike Tomlin and Art Rooney to which running back should be playing. So there's a lot of questions to be answered. If you have questions, go ahead and put those in the comment section here. Welcome in to the live viewers. Hopefully we'll get a few more as the morning progresses here. I wanted to open things up by talking about really how the Steelers come out in this game against the Rams. Are they going to come out flat? Or are they going to come out stat? Ready to rock, ready to roll, moving, grooving? That is going to be the question because this is going to be a tough Rams team in their house. Yes, I get it. It's SoFi Stadium. Neither one of the teams that play there have a massive local fan base that make things difficult for opposing teams coming in to improve the game for the Rams. So the Steelers will probably, by the end of the day, have a 60-40 Steeler crowd at this game. And so they'll be operating as if it's a home matchup, which is great. Great for the Steelers, but still, a long trip out west, that always has affected this team. Whether or not you want to believe it was Roethlisberger or whoever, maybe a different offensive coordinator, maybe a different group of players, this team has always started out flat, going on the road to the west. So can they overcome that, and can they get out to a fast start, a hot start against a Rams team that pretty good defense? They're okay. They're not going to light up the world. They're not going to crush you and make you wonder why you play the game if you're an offensive player. But they've got players. They've still got Aaron Donald, who's a game wrecker up the middle. They've got some ballers on the back end. They've got Quentin Lake, a guy that I got a chance to interview along with Andrew Wilbart on the Steelers Fix this offseason, son of Carnell Lake, the famous, infamous Steeler, Hall of Famer. And I just think, this Rams defense has a chance to beat a tough unit for the Steelers offense, which has its own struggles to go against. So if that is the case, sorry about that. If that is the case, then this offense is going to have to start fast and show something that we haven't seen yet this year, because if not, the Rams offense could prevent the Steelers from even being in this game with the struggles of the Steelers defense, stopping players from actually producing yards and box score stats. It's not everything. Obviously, when you can take the ball away, when you can force splash plays, sacks, turnovers, whatnot, in critical moments, you're going to overcome some of your lack of ability to actually stop teams between the 20s. But the Steelers, this is an offense that you've got to stop between the 20s. They've got a nails kicker in Matt Gay. who just makes everything. They've got a stud quarterback who's playing maybe the best football he's played at least obviously since the Super Bowl, but maybe even better football than that season. He's just comfortable in the pocket, hitting wide open receivers in this Sean McVay offense that Steelers have already faced a similar offense twice this year and been blown out in San Francisco at home, and then in Houston against Bobby Slowick in that Houston offense led by a rookie quarterback. This is no rookie quarterback. This is a guy who's been there, done that. Maybe has a Hall of Fame resume now with the stats he's put up in Detroit and now the Super Bowl championship that he garnered in LA. So that's going to be something to watch for this game. I think that you've got obviously a Steelers defense that can get after the quarterback. Maybe this Rams team is not as good at getting the ball out as quick, not as good in the screen game, and likes to work down the field a little bit more. They're not going to have either of their two top running backs in Kyren Williams or Rivers, and that's going to be a big deal for them as well. So Steelers have some matchup advantages here on defense against this offensive line. Maybe they can create enough splash to keep the scoring down, to keep the Steelers offense in the game. And if that is the case, then they have a shot at winning. It's going to be tough, though. Let's get to our first question of the day. Thank you to Brian Brown, who is a faithful listener, someone who jumps in no matter what time it is. Swear if I started at 2 a.m., Brian Brown would be in here. Brian asks, do you think we'll see some more splash from the Steelers special teams? I sure hope so. And hopefully it's not negative splash. Now that Gunnar Olszewski is no longer on this roster, hopefully you've got a group of players now that can secure the football and make plays. I personally don't understand why Calvin Austin III hasn't been out for kick returns as well as punt returns. Like I mean, I get that he had been bumped up in the receiver distribution chart in the depth chart because of Deontay Johnson's injury. But with Deontay Johnson coming back, Calvin Austin absolutely needs to be your return man in both phases, punt return and kick return. He gives you the best chance at splash if he gets a chance to touch the ball. Now, controlled atmosphere at SoFi Stadium, there's going to be a lot of touchbacks in this game, unless the Rams are like, ooh, let's try to force them to fumble the ball because we know that they've had a propensity to do that. Then maybe they kick it to whoever's returning kicks. But it needs to be Calvin Austin. It doesn't make sense for it to be anybody else. Anthony McFarland, maybe if he comes back in this game. But it needs to be Calvin Austin III, in my opinion. So I think they can get some splash out of him. Anytime he touches the ball, he has a chance to go all the way. Got to eliminate penalties. You got to limit mistakes from your blocking group. Obviously, if you want to produce some splash there, set it up really well. This team knows how to block kicks. They know how to play press on punts and things like that. So you can always see this team make a play there. Maybe a blocked kick in this game too, which we haven't yet seen this year from Minkah Fitzpatrick and company. So yeah, there's a big chance, Brian, for some splash from the Steelers special teams here. And they might need it. They really might, because this is a Rams team that can put up some points on the scoreboard. They haven't every week. We saw the Bengals slow them down, even in the Bengals' relative rut that they were in to start the season. Still beat this Rams team without much offense and with just solid defense. You got to just play solid coverage defense here. So that kind of leads us into Brian's next question here. Thank you, Brian, for another question. Do you think Pat P will be in the slot? I really hope so. I really do. Because that means Joey Porter Jr. is out there on the field for the majority of snaps. Now, I will say this. I don't think he needs to exclusively play in the slot. I think he needs to be able to jump outside as well when the Steelers feel like I just get this gut-wrenching feeling, Steeler Nation, that Levi Wallace against Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, it's just not going to be fair. It's just not going to be fair for the Steelers. they're not going to be able to keep up with these guys. Their route running ability so far this season is nothing that the Steelers have seen yet. You've got some physical specimens in San Francisco, like George Kittle, like Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, but just the sheer ability to win on the route, Cooper Kupp is him, and they're going to line up Cooper Kupp on that defensive left side a lot. They just are. They're going to take advantage of that matchup, and that's not going to be good. It's just not. So maybe I don't know. Maybe you have Joey Travel in this game. The Steelers don't do that. They do play a lot of man coverage. So maybe you got to work in some more zones this week. I just don't like this matchup for the Steelers secondary at all. So even if Patrick Peterson plays in the slot for a good portion of this game, I think the Steelers' issues are not going to be solved this week against this Rams wide receiver group and quarterback in Matt Stafford, who can pick you apart from the pocket and sees things before the snap, operates this Sean McVay offense with absolute control and professionalism. Really, like, just to focus in on the Rams for a second, the trade from the Rams to the Detroit Lions to send Jared Goff and a first-round pick for Matt Stafford, absolutely genius move, worked out perfect for both sides. This was a huge win for both sides. Matt Stafford, it was stale there, and it was not working in Detroit. The trade gets him a Super Bowl, gets the Rams a Super Bowl, and now the Lions are one of the best teams in the NFL with a quarterback who's just picking apart defenses in an offense that is just schemed up so well that teams can't stop it. So a really great trade for both of them. And I just think it's, something that the Steelers here now facing a Matt Stafford-led Rams, something they're going to have to contend with. Looking back at the quarterbacks that they've played, Matt Stafford is easily the most experienced one here and could give them some fits, especially with this group of receivers. All right, let's see. Brian Brown follows up. You don't think the Steelers are in the same spot? Isn't Ahkello Witherspoon one of their corners? Yes, he is. But I don't trust this offensive design in the same regard that I hold the McVay offense. So still, although the Steelers probably have a matchup advantage here with the Steelers wide receivers versus the Rams corners, I just don't think that schematically the Steelers work or do well enough to take full advantage of that talent deficiency on the Rams. So maybe they do, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe this is the start of something great. But when have we seen that? Where have we seen that yet that would give us any indication that this is something that we could expect? So I don't know. I'd like to think so, Brian. I really would, but I have my concerns. I do. Dave Schofield hopping in the chat this morning. Thanks, Dave. Pat P won't be the only one. Big nickel will likely be Sullivan because of Peterson's inability to stop the run. Absolutely. Shandon Sullivan has been a good tackler so far this season. He plays well coming up to the line of scrimmage. So absolutely. Like I said, Pat P needs to play in the slot some here, but he doesn't need to be there the whole time. They need to be rotating in players. They need to get Levi Wallace off the field. And if that means Pat P on one side, Joey Porter Jr. on the other, and Shandon Sullivan or Elijah Riley, whoever in the slot there, do that, because I just don't like this. I just don't like this matchup for the Steelers corners, no matter who's on the field. Joey Porter Jr., as good as he's been, hasn't faced in the spot play that he's been asked to do, hasn't faced wide receivers that work you over like these guys do. So don't be surprised, Steeler Nation, if it's a rough outing for the secondary. Just kind of throwing that out there. It's a winnable game, as all games are for the Steelers team, because they've got the horses on defense, because they've got big-time playmakers like George Pickens. And Kenny Pickett in the fourth quarter, you can't ever count this team out heading into a week, but game script could flip really quickly this week, and it could be an issue. All righty, let's see. Brian, exactly right. You have those concerns too, he says, but Coach T does not care. Coach T does not care. In fact, if the Steelers win this game and Cooper Kupp puts up 250 yards receiving, Mike Tomlin won't care. The issue would persist. It could be a reason that they lose moving forward. You might get lucky in this game like you did against the Ravens in their last outing. But still, I just think, when you address a comment or a question from a reporter asking you, how do you fix an issue? And you say, the issue is not a big deal because we won. I think that is not looking at the whole picture like it needs to be. But I digress. I am not the coach of this team. All right, let's see. Dave Schofield. Why didn't the Steelers activate McFarland? A very good question. He's. I wonder if you're setting me up, Dave. Maybe you know the answer to this. I don't know. I would say maybe just because they feel comfortable with the two guys ahead of them. They've been relatively injury free. I just don't know. I don't know why you wouldn't have unless he's not ready to go. So maybe they still will. You've still got today, Saturday, to elevate someone, I believe. So maybe they do that and get McFarland back off of the injury reserve list along with Deontay Johnson here. And then Dave asks another question. What's the biggest change we could see in offense coming out of the bye? I'll get to that and more in the second half of the show. Right after these messages from our sponsors. If you're listening live, don't go anywhere. The Steelers Q&A will be right back. All right, welcome back to the Steelers Q&A. My name is Jeremy Betts. So glad you're here joining me. If you're joining live, thank you for doing that. Got a small crowd this morning on a Saturday. That is okay. It is a Saturday morning, and I'm sure everyone is busy or sleeping in from a long work week. But if you're checking this out later, wherever you get your podcasts, you can find this show. Appreciate you listening in. We're jumping back into Dave's question that I mentioned before the break. Dave asks, what is the biggest challenge we can see on offense coming out of the bye? So, man, I think that it could be with the Steelers and Mike Tomlin really looking at kind of reverting this offensive line back to Dan Moore Jr., Isaac Seumalo, Mason Cole, James Daniels, and then Chuks Okorafor along that line. I think you eliminate maybe what could have been a strength for you on the left side of the line with Broderick Jones in the lineup, where you can just power run people on the left side. And maybe some into this game, if Dan Moore Jr. indeed does get the start, which it is looking increasingly more likely that is the case, it just makes sense to me that the Steelers' issues up front will continue. And I've heard a lot of recent talk about yards per carry being more of an offensive line stat, and I totally agree with that. The effectiveness of how often your running back is able to get space before he's contacted, yards before he's contacted, that is huge. And it's just not something that the Steelers get a lot of. Their running backs are routinely hit touch behind the offensive line, and I think that that's an issue. I just don't know if there's the power game up front that there could be if you had Broderick Jones up there. And so we'll see how the Steelers continue to play this out. I think that could be an issue up front for them. The Rams defense, again, they don't stretch you in any one specific way other than maybe Aaron Donald up the gut. The Steelers are going to have to be sound there. Kenny Pickett doesn't need to be bailing pockets because of interior pressure. That's not going to behoove the offense as a whole. So I think that's going to be the biggest issue, though, is can this offensive line control the line of scrimmage for a running game that absolutely has to be a factor if the Steelers' offense is going to improve. That is the predicate for Matt Canada's offense being good, is the running game. And we saw it in the run of decency and sometimes even very good offense at the end of last year, that the running game was the portion of that led the charge. I think the Steelers averaged 140 plus yards rushing per game in the second half of the season when they went on their 7-2 winning streak. So Let's see. Kind of answering this question already. So sorry, Brian, but he did ask, do the Rams have a good run and pass defense at all? I never watched them. They're okay. They're just okay across the board. Again, it's Aaron Donald, like I said, up front that gets pressure. They're okay just everywhere else, and they're middle of the pack against the run, against the pass. So the Steelers definitely can take advantage. They should have the playmakers to take advantage, but can the scheme put them in proper position? That's the question all along. I think, Brian, you're going to see a Rams defense that plays hard, maybe overachieves a little bit for Coach Raheem Morris. Sorry, I keep wanting to say Raheem Mostert, the Dolphins running back, but Coach Raheem Morris coaches these guys up despite their kind of no-name status, if you will. They have a chance to play hard and flummox opponents at least for maybe a quarter or a half at a time, and then things kind of tend to fall apart for the defense at points. But so we'll see. We'll see how they play against the Steelers offense. But yeah, mediocre is the term that you would use for this Rams defense throughout the course of the season so far. Dave Schofield comments on a question he asked earlier. They activated Johnson, but not Ant Mac. They only have 52 on the roster. The flight just left, so their moves are probably done. That's interesting. Very interesting. I wonder if somebody tagged along that hasn't been activated yet. If so, then maybe they get that done. But if not, then maybe they go into it with 52 players. That's very strange for a Steelers team that likes to have all hands on deck if possible. So we'll keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on Steel Curtain Network. I'm sure that will pop up as we learn more information about that. Okay. So this comment from Brian Brown is absolute truth here. Matthew Stafford will shred us if we don't pressure him. Yeah, the Steelers defense winning the day on Sunday is all about the pressure up front. And that needs to come from the middle too, not just TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, but you got to see Keanu Benton and Larry Ogunjobi get into the backfield and cause disruption on passing downs. Because you're right, Stafford will no look pick you apart without even batting an eye if he gets a clean pocket all game long. And I was looking at some stats earlier in the week. Matt Stafford is top 10 in snap to throw time. I believe hovering right around the 2.5 second mark. So he gets rid of the ball pretty quickly, and the Steelers are going to have to contend with that as well. Got to play sticky coverage until the pass rush can get there. That's where I wonder if the Steelers have the guys to be able to do that in the secondary. I think Minkah Fitzpatrick needs to be free to play kind of that robber role this week instead of like locking him up on somebody specifically in man-to-man coverage. He needs to be able to roam and try to make plays. I think that's going to be a huge deal this week for them to hopefully, where they're a little bit weak in the man-to-man type situations at corner, maybe Minkah Fitzpatrick gives you a chance to take a ball away because he's just kind of roaming the field and being the Minkah that we came to know and love. And hopefully the Steelers will let him be that at some point in the season. This would be a good week for it. Dave asks another question. Who gets more targets, Johnson or Pickens? I want it to be Pickens, 100%. The most Dave Schofield answer of all time would be say push. They both get 7 targets apiece. No, I think Deontay Johnson gets more targets today, or excuse me, this weekend. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's closer than normal with him just getting back. Hopefully there's no aggravation of injury. That could be where things get skewed and George Pickens maybe takes over the target share. But I think Johnson probably gets more work underneath, and George Pickens goes back to his boomer bust ways, more or less, as far as target share goes. And I would hope that is not the case. I would hope that the Steelers offense and Mike Tomlin would say, Matt Canada, you just got to scheme George Pickens the ball. You got to get him the football because he's our best playmaker. Even when Deontay Johnson's out there, Deontay Johnson has the ability to give you some easy completions, which the Steelers haven't had that yet this year. So that's huge. But George Pickens is your big play threat. He's the guy who changes what defenses are doing on the back end where they roll coverages. He's the guy that forces defense to stay honest and not load the box. Now that you've seen it on tape several times this year where he just crushes one-on-one opportunities down the field, specifically against the Ravens. I doubt you'll see much zero blitz this week if he's on the field. So that is something to watch. Excuse me. I just think that Johnson, the style of play that he operates with is conducive to getting a lot of targets. So that is probably the direction that goes. Alrighty, what are the chances that maybe, just maybe, the Steelers offense comes out rolling like it's preseason? You want me to give you a percentage? I'll give you 19.7%. Not quite 20%. I don't feel good about it to that level. Not a quarter percentage there. I just don't feel it. There's a chance. There's always a chance that they make corrections and get better. I don't think it's ever going to look like preseason ball. Do you want my honest opinion on preseason ball? I think Matt Canada's system is so basic that he's already giving his best stuff in preseason against defenses that are just absolute straight vanilla. So that's why it works. So maybe that's the case. Maybe not. Maybe I'm oversimplifying. Maybe I'm beating up the guy too much. But no, I just don't know that we'll see the preseason Steelers outside of a rare drive here and there. I think you saw it in a drive against the Raiders where they went up and down the field and scored on a play action throw to Pat Freiermuth. I think you saw that. But man, I just don't know if we're ever going to see this season the Steelers offense consistently come out rolling and work throughout a game like they did in the preseason. So fingers crossed. It's a non-zero chance. So hey, that's good. Maybe that's good enough. But at this point, I just don't trust it, and I think Steelers fans do not as well. So let's make this the final question here, and then we will wrap it up on the Saturday morning. Again, if you are unable to listen live, this show always hits the audio feeds pretty close to when it's done, so you can check that out if you missed the first portion of the show. But Brian Brown here asks our final question: if the Steelers take another 35-7 beatdown, are we just going to rinse and repeat all season? So far, that's been the story. I would say that would be the story again after this week. Rinse, repeat, hope that you play a little bit better against the teams you're more familiar with. And yeah, it just doesn't seem like that the Steelers can really do anything about that. I mean, they've already shown that they're not going to fire Matt Canada. They've already shown that they're not going to change up personnel too much as far as what we've seen. So maybe as the season continues to progress, guys come in to new roles. Broderick Jones becomes a starter. Joey Porter Jr. really just never leaves the field. That would all be ideal, but it's just not what we've seen so far. So I have my doubts, Brian, but I would hope that Mike Tomlin would say, okay, we just cannot do this anymore. If they get beat 35-7 or 30-7 or whatever, that he would just say, okay, I'm sorry, I was wrong. We cannot do this anymore. But I just don't see that being the case. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Steelers Q&A this Saturday morning. Tune in if you missed it, wherever you get your podcast. We'll be back next week. Hopefully I'll have a guest next week. Again, hard to get guests on the Saturday morning time slot, but we're making it work. And I'm glad you were able to join me today, Brian. Dave, looks like we've got some other viewers in there as well. Thank you for viewing. Next time, if you'd like to chime in, go for it. Happy to answer your questions. But that's going to do it for us here from the Steel Curtain Network on the Steelers Q&A. I'm Jeremy Betts. We'll talk to you next week.